I never thought my life would turn into a battle against the very people who were supposed to maintain order. But when you live near an HOA, you learn one thing very quickly. They don't just enforce rules, they bend them to serve their own interests. And when you refuse to play along, well, they find ways to make your life hell. I'd been living on my wheat farm for over a decade. The land had been in my family for generations, passed down from my grandfather, who worked every inch of it with his bare hands. My fields stretched across acres, golden and perfect, a sight so stunning that sometimes just looking at them made me forget all my worries. Farming wasn't just a business for me. It was my way of life. It's my identity. Then the HOA came along. A new development had sprung up about a mile from my land, a so-called luxury gated community. The kind of place where people paid ridiculous HOA fees to be told what color to paint their houses, how many inches their grass could grow, and when they were allowed to put out their trash cans. The HOA board, a group of self-important busybodies, had been trying to get me to sell part of my land for months. They wanted to beautify their entrance, create a walking path, plant a few artificial-looking flower beds, and maybe even install a community dog park. I refused, not because I was against development, but because I knew their type. They didn't care about my land, my business, or my way of life. They just wanted to control it, and I wasn't about to let that happen. At first, they tried to be diplomatic. The HOA president, a smug woman named Karen Whitmore, came by with a fake smile and a thinly veiled bribe. "You know," she had said, standing in my driveway, looking at my land as if it were already hers, "if you agree to sell just a small portion, we could make things easier for you." I asked her exactly what that meant. "Well," she continued, "we have a lot of influence with the county. There are zoning laws, regulations, permits that could be, let's say, delayed for certain landowners. But if we were to work together, we could help smooth things out for you." I stared at her in disbelief. "Are you threatening me with zoning violations if I don't sell?" she gasped, feigning shock. "Oh, no, of course not. I'm just saying, we can either be good neighbors, or we can make things very difficult." That was the moment I knew exactly what kind of people I was dealing with. I told her to get off my property and never come back. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The morning, everything changed. It started with a smell, a disgusting, overpowering stench that hit me the moment I stepped outside. Not the fresh, earthy scent of my wheat fields, but something rotten, chemical, and putrid. I followed the smell, my stomach tightening with every step, and then I saw it. At first, my brain refused to process what I was looking at. It was so out of place, so wrong, that for a split second, I thought I was dreaming. But no, this was real. An entire truckload of garbage had been dumped right in the middle of my field. Not just a few bags of trash. No, this was deliberate, targeted destruction. There were broken appliances, shattered glass, piles of plastic waste, construction debris, and even hazardous materials. Paint cans, rusted metal, and leaking chemicals. It looked like someone had emptied out an entire dumpster truck right onto my land. I felt my pulse pounding in my ears. My heart was racing, not with fear, but with pure, boiling rage. Who would do something like this? I moved closer, scanning the wreckage, my boots crunching over broken glass. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Tire tracks, fresh tire tracks, leading straight from the road. And not just any road, the private road that led directly from the HOA community. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just random illegal dumping. This was intentional. The HOA had done this. They couldn't pressure me into selling my land, so they decided to destroy it instead. The aftermath, realization, turns to rage. I stood there, fists clenched, every muscle in my body tense with fury. The audacity, the sheer malice behind this act. Did they think I would just clean it up and move on? Did they think I would give in? Number. If they thought this would break me, they had no idea who they were dealing with. I pulled out my phone and started recording. I filmed everything. The garbage, the damage, the tire tracks leading to the HOA neighborhood. I took dozens of pictures from every angle. If they wanted war, they were going to get one. I wasn't just going to clean this up and forget about it. No, I was going to make them pay. I was going to make sure that every single person responsible for this regretted the day they messed with my land. And I already had a plan forming in my head. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. Lying in bed, I kept replaying the scene over and over in my head. The sickening smell, the mountain of filth, the tire tracks leading straight to the HOA neighborhood. The rage burning inside me wouldn't let me rest. The HOA thought they could bully me into submission. They thought they could intimidate me into selling my land. They were about to find out how badly they had miscalculated. I wasn't just going to clean this up and move on. No, I was going to make them pay, legally, publicly, and financially. And I knew exactly where to start. Gathering the evidence. First thing the next morning, I went straight to work. Before I could make my move, I needed solid evidence. Not just speculation, but undeniable proof that the HOA was responsible. I grabbed my trail cameras. My property had a few security cameras near my house, but the fields were too vast to cover everything. Thankfully, I had a few motion-activated trail cameras set up along the outer edges of my land to monitor wildlife and trespassers. I rushed to check the footage, heart pounding as I flipped through the recordings, and then I saw it. A massive white dump truck. The timestamp 3:42 a.m. It had come down the private HOA road, driven straight onto my field, and emptied its entire load of garbage. The footage even caught a few figures standing near the truck, their faces obscured, but their clothing matching the security uniforms HOA members often wore. I had them, but I needed more. Tracking the truck with the video evidence in hand, I followed the tire tracks leading out of my property. They ran straight onto the private HOA road and disappeared into their gated community. Now, there were only two ways to access that road. You had to live in the HOA neighborhood. You had to have special access granted by the HOA. That meant one thing: the truck belonged to someone inside the community. But who? I drove into town and went straight to the county records office. In the US, many county offices keep public records of waste disposal contracts and vehicle registrations. If the HOA had hired a company or had their own dump truck, it would be on file. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. The HOA had a waste management contract with a private company, but the contract only covered residential trash pickup. There was no mention of bulk disposal services. That meant one of two things. The HOA had illegally used the community's waste management services to dump the trash. They had their own private truck for unauthorized disposal. Either way, it was highly illegal, setting the trap. Now that I had solid evidence, it was time to make my first move. I called the County Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and the local code enforcement office. Illegal dumping, especially on agricultural land, was a major offense. If hazardous materials were involved, the fines could reach tens of thousands of dollars. I explained everything, sent them the security footage, tire track photos, and the HOA's contract records. They took it very seriously. Within hours, I had officers scheduled to come inspect the site. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to make sure the HOA panicked. The public exposure. That evening, I posted the security footage and photos on a local community Facebook group that covered news in my town. I didn't directly accuse the HOA. I just posted, "Woke up to this disaster in my wheat field. A full truckload of trash dumped illegally overnight. Security footage shows a truck coming from the HOA road. If anyone has information, please let me know. Authorities have been contacted." The reaction was instant. Within minutes, comments started pouring in. "This is disgusting. Who would do this? If this came from the HOA, they need to be held accountable. Looks like someone is trying to get rid of their trash without paying disposal fees. You should file a lawsuit." Then something interesting happened. A woman, anonymous profile, but clearly someone from inside the HOA, left a cryptic comment. "You didn't hear this from me, but check who has access to the maintenance vehicles in the HOA. You might find your answer there." Bingo. The HOA had its own maintenance trucks. If one of them had been used for illegal dumping, that was direct proof of their involvement. The HOA starts to panic. The next morning, code enforcement officers, EPA investigators, and even a county sheriff's deputy arrived at my property. They took samples from the waste, confirming that some materials were hazardous. The investigators followed the tire tracks, noting that they led directly to the HOA road, and then, as if on cue, a familiar SUV pulled up. Karen Whitmore. She stepped out, her usual smug expression replaced with something I'd never seen before, nervousness. "I heard there was an issue," she said, trying to sound composed. I stared at her, letting the silence drag on. Then I simply said, "Yeah, a big one." She glanced at the investigators, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I assure you, the HOA had nothing to do with this." I pulled out my phone and played the security footage. Her face went pale. "You were saying?" I asked. She didn't have an answer. "The authorities take over." The investigators informed her that an official inquiry had been launched. They would be subpoenaing HOA maintenance records, checking vehicle logs for any HOA-owned trucks, reviewing security footage from nearby properties. If they confirmed the HOA was responsible for illegal dumping, the fines could be astronomical, $50,000 or more depending on the damage. Karen tried to backpedal. "I'll have to speak with the board. This must be a misunderstanding." The county officer shook his head. "Misunderstanding or not, if your organization is responsible, you're looking at serious legal consequences." Her fake confidence crumbled. I just smiled. The war was just beginning. The HOA thought they could bully me into selling my land. They thought they could scare me into submission. But now they were the ones panicking, and this was just the beginning, because I wasn't just going to get them fined, I was going to bury them. The first cracks in the HOA's armor were already showing. Karen Whitmore, the smug, power-hungry HOA president, had shown up to my land that morning trying to downplay the situation, acting like a full truckload of garbage had just magically appeared in my wheat field. But when I showed her the security footage, her confidence shattered. The best part, this wasn't just a small neighborhood dispute anymore. The authorities were involved. The county's Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, had classified the waste as illegal dumping with hazardous materials mixed in. The sheriff's department had opened a case to track down who was responsible. Code enforcement officials had subpoenaed HOA records to see if one of their maintenance trucks had been used. And the HOA, they were about to get hit from all sides. But I wasn't satisfied with just watching them panic. I wanted to destroy them, and I knew exactly how to do it. The HOA board starts to crumble. A few days later, I got an anonymous email. The subject line, HOA secrets. The message, "I know what they did. I tried to stop it, but if I speak out, they'll ruin me. I have proof, but I need to know. I won't be the only one taking the fall." It was someone inside the HOA board. This was huge. I responded immediately, telling them that law enforcement was already investigating and that any proof they provided could protect them from being held responsible. Within an hour, I got a reply, this time with attachments. I opened the first document, and my jaw dropped. It was a maintenance log showing that one of the HOA's utility trucks had been signed out at 3 a.m. on the night of the dumping. The truck had been returned at 4:10 a.m., and the person who signed it out, Karen Whitmore's right-hand man, Mark Evans, the HOA's maintenance supervisor. That wasn't all. The whistleblower had also sent email exchanges between HOA board members discussing the illegal dumping plan. They had actually argued over where to dump the trash, with some members suggesting an abandoned lot, but Karen insisting on my wheat field because, and I quote, "maybe this will make him reconsider selling." That was it. That was the smoking gun. I had written proof that they had deliberately and maliciously destroyed my property as an intimidation tactic, and I wasn't about to waste time. I forwarded everything, the maintenance logs, the emails, the HOA's waste contract, and my security footage, to the EPA investigators, the sheriff's department, and the county officials handling the case. Then, just to twist the knife, I leaked the documents to the local news. The HOA's dirty secrets go public. The news spread like wildfire. Within 24 hours, our local TV station was running a full segment on HOA corruption and illegal dumping scandal. The Facebook post I had originally made, It now had over 10,000 shares and people were furious. Local residents turned on the HOA immediately. So they've been misusing our HOA fees. For this, they did this just to bully a farmer. They should all be removed. Illegal dumping with hazardous waste, that's a felony in some states. I want my HOA fees back. This is fraud. But it got even worse for the HOA because once the state EPA got involved, they expanded their investigation. And what they found, this wasn't the first time the HOA had dumped trash illegally. Over the past 2 years, the HOA had been secretly using their maintenance trucks to dump excess garbage, landscaping debris, and even old construction materials in unauthorized locations. They had been cutting costs by avoiding proper disposal fees, and they had been doing it for years. Now they weren't just facing fines, they were facing criminal charges. The arrests begin. The sheriff's department moved fast. First, they arrested Mark Evans, the maintenance supervisor who had signed out the truck. He tried to deny everything, but when confronted with the email evidence, he flipped immediately, cutting a deal to testify against the HOA board in exchange for a reduced sentence. Next, Karen Whitmore. The morning news cameras were rolling when sheriff's deputies showed up at her house and escorted her out in handcuffs. She was charged with multiple offenses: illegal dumping, environmental violations, conspiracy to commit property damage, and because she had used HOA funds to pay for these illegal activities, she was also charged with fraud and embezzlement. Other HOA board members started resigning immediately, trying to save themselves, but it was too late. The entire community turned against them, and the best part, I wasn't done yet. Delivering the final blow with the HOA board collapsing and criminal charges piling up, it was time for the final strike. I filed a massive lawsuit against the HOA for property destruction, crop loss damages, emotional distress. And because I had overwhelming evidence, I didn't just demand cleanup costs, I went for the maximum penalties possible. By the time the case went to court, the HOA was already bankrupt from legal fees and fines. The judge ruled in my favor, awarding me hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages. And as a final twist of the knife, the HOA was officially dissolved. The once powerful, arrogant board gone. Karen Whitmore serving time. The HOA members who had blindly supported them now left scrambling to manage their own neighborhood without the abusive board controlling them. And me? I stood in my wheat field, looking out at the land they had tried to take from me, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Victory. The HOA was dead. Karen Whitmore, once the iron-fisted tyrant of the community, was sitting in a county jail cell awaiting trial. Half of the HOA board had either been arrested or resigned, and the once pristine neighborhood was now in complete disarray. And I stood at the edge of my wheat field, staring at the land they had tried to destroy, feeling something they never thought I'd feel: vindicated. But the story wasn't over yet, because while I had won, the people living in that HOA, they were about to experience a whole new level of chaos. The HOA neighborhood falls apart. With the HOA dissolved and their fraud exposed, the residents of the community suddenly found themselves in a nightmare. No one to manage. HOA funds. With Karen and her cronies gone, no one was handling the HOA's finances. Thousands of dollars were missing, and residents suddenly realized they had no idea where their fees had been going. Some of the funds had been embezzled. Karen's luxury vacations made sense now, while others had been spent on illegal dumping operations. The bank froze the HOA's assets as part of the criminal investigation. That meant no more maintenance, no more landscaping, no more security patrols. The neighborhood starts falling apart. Within weeks, the once pristine lawns became overgrown. The pool area was shut down, leaving it to turn into a mosquito-infested swamp. The gated entrance broke, and since no one was paying for repairs, it was left hanging open, letting in whoever wanted to wander in. Trash pickup? Gone. Residents had to pay for private garbage collection, and many refused, so piles of trash bags started stacking up in driveways. Neighbors turn on each other. Without HOA enforcement, Some homeowners stopped following the rules entirely. One guy started parking his broken-down RV on his lawn. Another built a neon pink fence just to spite his neighbors. One family even started renting their house on Airbnb, turning the once exclusive neighborhood into a weekend party zone. The same people who had supported the HOA now realized just how badly they had been screwed. And the best part, they had no one to blame but themselves. Karen's fate, the courtroom reckoning. Months later, Karen finally faced her day in court. The charges against her were stacked: illegal dumping, environmental violations, conspiracy to commit property damage, fraud, and embezzlement. The prosecution didn't hold back. They presented every piece of evidence: the security footage, the maintenance logs, the emails proving she had orchestrated the dumping, and then the nail in the coffin. Mark Evans, her former right-hand man, testified against her in exchange for a lighter sentence. He confirmed, yes, Karen ordered the dumping. Yes, she knew it was illegal. Yes, she used HOA money to cover it up. The jury, they took less than 2 hours to convict her. The judge didn't go easy on her. Karen was sentenced to 5 years in prison, plus massive fines for environmental damage. When she was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, she finally looked as powerless as the people she had spent years tormenting. Justice had been served. My land, fully restored, and better than ever. After the dust settled, I fully restored my wheat field. The lawsuit settlement covered all damages, plus a hefty extra for pain and suffering. But I didn't stop there. I took some of that money and invested in security upgrades, more high-resolution cameras around my property, stronger fences to keep out trespassers, a locked gate blocking off the private road that led to my field. No one from that disaster of a neighborhood would ever mess with my land again. And to top it all off, I used part of the HOA lawsuit payout to buy the abandoned lot next to my farm. Why? Because it was the only other open land next to the HOA neighborhood. Meaning, if those entitled homeowners ever wanted to expand, they'd have to buy it from me. And trust me, they couldn't afford what I was charging. The moral of the story: never mess with the wrong person. The HOA thought they could bully me into selling my land. They thought they could dump their problems onto me and get away with it. They thought I was just some farmer they could push around, but they didn't realize I was smarter, I was patient, and I was relentless. And because of that, their entire empire crumbled. Their community fell apart. Their leader went to prison. Their HOA no longer existed. And me? I walked away with justice, financial compensation, and complete peace of mind. That, my friends, is how you win.